What's up guys, we're back here with another video, and it has been a while since I've done a video like this, but we are going to be doing a Bloodborne boss ranking based on difficulty. So that means we're going easiest to hardest. We're excluding Chalice dungeon bosses, so this will only be main game and DLC bosses, and um, most of this footage was captured on New Game Plus 3 or 4 with every Rikuyo or Chikage, but it was the same build I went through on my first playthrough, and we're going to be doing, the rankings are based on first time playthrough, and as Bloodborne was my first Souls game, that can go into some of the bosses, I think, especially a lot of the earlier ones, but yeah, so through the whole game I had a Blood Tinge build, using the Chikage and the Rikuyo. So, and once again, just because I call a boss easy or hard, that's the thing about Bloodborne, is that, you know, everyone has their own different set of bosses that they struggle with or find easy. So just because I say one is hard doesn't mean it was necessarily, you know, hard for you. So I'd like to hear what you guys think in the comments, what, you know, what bosses were difficult for you. But anyway, let's just get right into the rankings. So, coming in at the bottom of the list, and what I find to be the easiest boss in the game, are the Witches of Hemwick. So, basically, this boss, all you have to do is they spawn minions and they'll hide from you, and you just have to run around the arena and find them. And to me, this is probably the easiest boss in the game because they don't really fight back too much. They have some attacks that they can hit you with. They have some AoEs. They have a grab, but they rarely do them. And most of the time, they'll just stand there and take the hits. And so basically, this becomes a game of just running around the arena until you find them, and then, you know, killing them, basically. Because the minions that they spawn are like the blindest enemies in the entire game. They don't really aggro to you unless you're right on top of them. So this basically means you're just running around and killing the witches basically with no resistance. So this is the easiest boss in the game for me. This is basically the only boss that I think I have almost never died to. Basically, like, I only kill them because because I need the rune tool. But other than that, they're kind of an uneventful and boring fight. But I do like their music, and I like their whole, like, atmosphere, so it's not a total bad boss, but it is the easiest in the game, and is pretty much a total cakewalk. Next up, and second easiest, we have the Celestial Emissary, and I am actually ashamed to say that I have died to this boss twice. Once on my initial playthrough and once going for footage for this video. But basically, as you can see, this boss is just a bunch of normal enemies stuck into an arena, and then one of them will not show up as a health bar. He's the actual one. He's the one that you actually have to hit. And once you get him low enough, he will turn into the big one, and that's basically it. This boss is pretty much a joke boss, and the only way you can basically die is if you don't crowd control them enough, and that's basically all this fight is can you crowd control them enough. And basically you've been doing this the entire game in the levels themselves, so it's, you know, when it's a boss, it's basically just clearing out any other room in the entire game. It's not hard, and that's why it's second easiest on this list. Next up is Mergo's Wet Nurse, and for what is potentially your final boss in the game, this boss is ridiculously easy. And it all comes down to the fact that she doesn't have a move to get you out from behind her. And all her, you know, normal moves, which all hit from the front, are too slow to catch you. So all you have to do is walk behind her, not even run, just walk behind her and then start wailing on her because she can't do anything. She can dash away, but that's not very threatening. She can teleport, once again, not very threatening because there's no attack. There are only like 2 or 3 attacks that are actually threatening. She's got one combo that does a pretty good amount of damage, and it can stun lock you if you're not careful. And then she's got like a circular spinning attack, which once again does a lot of damage, but it's pretty easy to see coming, and you can outrange it. And the final move she's got that may pose difficulty is her clone. She'll spawn a clone. Everything will go like dark. But once again, there's an easy counter to where you can just run around the arena. And, I guess first time you may not know that, but, pretty safe to assume that when the whole arena goes dark, you'll probably get scared and just run anyway, and then, oh wait, she can't hit me while I'm running. So, kind of a disappointment that she's so easy, but I still, once again, don't think she's really bad. I think that her area is cool. I think her whole design is cool, but overall, very easy boss. And, once again, for a boss that could potentially have been your final boss, this boss is way too easy. And, coming out the end game area, it just doesn't, fit, gameplay wise. But other than that, that's Margot's Wet Nurse. And let's move on to the next one. Also, why does it take so long for the Nightmare Slaying to pop up? I guess it's building suspense, but man, that scared me the first time it happened. Coming up next, we have the Living Failures, which are very similar to the Celestial Emissary, but there are a few differences that make them a little bit more difficult. Number one being that they have an absurd amount of damage. They do a lot of damage, which means you have to be on your toes. You can't just tank hits. And second of all, that they actually have 2 different types. There are melee guys, and then there are like spell casting guys. And basically means that you have to keep your eye on 2 different types of enemies at once, even though they're both living failures. Because one of them will be shooting magic at you, while the other one will be trying to hit you. Which means that you have to actually wait for your opportunities. You can't just go in and smack them, because if you do that, they'll gang up on you, you'll get hit by a spell, you'll get smacked. And once again, because they do a lot of damage, you're gonna die if you get too aggressive. So once again, this is a very, I like to say like non-Bloodborne boss, because you have to be patient, you just have to wait, bide your time, and once again, just wait for the opportunities that they give you, because they will give you opportunities, but kind of sucks just having to run around the arena waiting, for them to split apart enough, or for one of them to get locked into an animation. But that's all you have to do. The Living Failures should not cause you too much trouble. It didn't cause me too much trouble, is what I'm saying. They have their signature Astrid attack, which, ironically enough, is actually the easiest to dodge. And you get to hit them while they're doing it. So that tip is that you can actually hit them while they're doing that. So while they're standing there casting that spell, if one of them's close enough to the sunflower, you can literally just keep wailing on it and kill it while it's doing that, which I find kind of funny. But they are not too difficult. They are the guardians of the next boss, which is the actual, basically the actual boss of this area. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Their OST goes hard. But yeah, Living Failures, pretty easy boss. So let's just go on to the next one. Next up, we have Dark Beast Parl, which for me is a very, a weird boss to rank. Mostly because I just do not like the Hippogian jail. It is probably one of my least favorite areas ever since I got taken there on my first ever playthrough. And This footage is not great for showing how easy this boss is because I'm doing it on New Game Plus with a non-serrated weapon, and I took a summon for some reason. I don't know why. Probably because I did that on my first playthrough and it didn't matter. But, Dark Beast Pearl does have some dangerous moves, but um, the reason why I put him so low is because if you're on your first playthrough, you're gonna burst through him as long as you have a sufficiently upgraded weapon. And assuming you've done Old Yarnum at this point, you're probably gonna just blitz through this fight if you know what to do. All you have to do is attack his limbs. He falls down, go to the next limb, and just keep going around his limbs until he's dead. Which I did not do. I didn't do it right. Um, but one thing I will have to say is his AoE's pretty dangerous, and he is a camera monster. But those are the only two things he's really got going for him. Other than that, I think his attacks are not too dangerous, especially, damage-wise. But basically, yeah, just stick to that strategy, and Dark Beast Paw should not be too hard. Although, I can see why someone would think this is hard. But personally, to me, this boss is not too much trouble. Okay, moving up in tier, and we have probably one of the first shocking rankings. It's Mardelgaris coming in, and I have a few reasons for why I think he's a lot easier than a lot of people. I see a lot of people saying that he is, pretty difficult. Especially, he was one of the, when a first game first comes out, there are a few bosses that, like, when everybody gets to them, everyone says they're really difficult. And then when the game's been out for a while, everyone realizes that they weren't that difficult. They're just one of the first few, like, real challenging bosses. We see that with, like, bosses like Radon and Elden Ring. But basically, I think his magic in his first phase is pretty easy to iframe through. Especially for me, I could tell which one he was doing and when he would do it. So, I think his magic is pretty easy. His AI is also pretty, easy to break. I've broken it a few times on separate playthroughs, and basically just by dodging forward, and you just keep dodging forward and hitting him, and if you've got a sufficiently quick weapon, there's nothing you can do. He's not hard to stagger. I think he's really just like a hunter fight, but easier because I don't know, he's not as quick as a hunter would be, and he obviously doesn't have a gun, so he can't stagger you. So yeah, that's basically why. He's got the sword slam attack, which, if you're not, if you don't know to shoot or, hit the sword, that can be difficult. But, you could get that by luck, or, you could just dodge him, honestly. It does add a level of stress to the fight, which does make it more difficult. But overall, I never struggle with Mardelgarius, even on New Game Plus. So that's why that's why he's so low here. Okay, so coming up next, we have the Cleric Beast, which is probably a little bit higher than most of you would have him, but I have my reasoning, and my reasoning is that, remember when I said at the start that this was my first Soul game, and it's from the perspective of a first-time playthrough. So, basically, this is a tutorial boss, and if you don't know the mechanics of the game, he's not very easy. Especially, when you start playing Bloodborne, I did not know this was a horror game, or like a horror-inspired game. It's not really a horror game, but it is. A lot of the designs, are freaky and shit like that. And this guy is loud. He just starts screaming and screaming, and my headphones were way too turned up for this fight when I went in here the first time. So basically, I got like a sensory overload. He was hitting me. He was jumping around the place. I couldn't see. And it basically, it was basically like an introduction to Bloodborne. Well, less like an introduction, more like a trial by fire. But obviously, I can blitz through him now that I know how to play the game. But if you don't know how to play the game, this guy can cause you a bit of trouble. But I think even on my first playthrough, it only took me like 4 tries. But man, the rush that I got when I first killed this guy was insane. So, Cleric Beast, still one of my favorite bosses, and I think he gets a little bit too much hate. But anyway, let's move on to the next one. Well, if it isn't the true noob killer of Central Yarnum. Father Gascoigne is the first hunter fight in the game, and man, he is scary. First time going up against him. You know, his arena, you know, it's basically made to trip you up. There's a bunch of gravestones. He can get you trapped in corners. But, you know, a thing I like, it's basically, you know, he's just like you. You know, you can literally have his exact build going into this fight, but he is so aggressive, and, you know, it's clear that he knows how to use these tools better than you. You know, like, he's a veteran, you know. He's experienced, and it's really scary, you know, just having him, you know, savagely try to, you know, just murder you. His music is one of my favorites in the entire game, you know. And then his third phase, man, that just, oh, dude, I was so scared when that happened to me the first time. I didn't know it was coming. Things that make this easier, though, you can parry him pretty reliably, dodging into his attacks, and, of course, the music box gives you a lot of free hits, makes this a lot easier. So he's not too difficult. Once again, he's just to weed out the new players, but still one of my favorite bosses. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have the Moon Presence, which for a secret final boss is surprisingly easy. You know, you can see I'm going into this with 1 bullet and 7 vials. That's because I fought Gehrman. You have to fight Gehrman right before this thing, but, you know, if you die to it, you don't have to fight Gehrman again, which, you know, it could have made it a lot harder if they made them, you know, back-to-back, sort of like Radagon Elebeast, but it doesn't matter. This thing would be hard if dodging straight into it and then just whacking it was not such an easy strategy. I mean, to be fair, they did give this thing moves to deal with that, but even still, I mean, you know, the dodge behind and hit strat is very, very effective, and I think this thing just does not have enough health. You know, it's kind of a glass cannon boss, sort of like Dark Beast Parl. It's got its, you know, 1 health attack move, but you know, if you just whack it enough, you'll get all that health back. And one thing that I do think adds to its difficulty significantly is its pools of numbing mist, which make it so you can't heal at all. I think that's, you know, that does add some difficulty, and it doesn't feel cheap, but still, I just don't think it has the health. I think you just do too much damage to this thing, you know, and you can, you know, once again, you just dodge straight through its attacks, hit it. But overall, a cool boss, and I don't think it was supposed to be hard. I think it was, you know, supposed to just be, you know, more of like a cinematic fight, which I always appreciate. You know, I don't think everything has to be super difficult. So yeah, that's Moon Presence. Next up, we have Rom the Vacuous Spider, who is the end boss at the Bergenworth area. She's basically a gimmick boss. What she does is she will spawn a bunch of spiders, and then for her first phase, she won't do anything, and then second phase, she'll like launch asteroids at you. She's got an AoE, stuff like that. So basically, there are 2 strategies you can use. You can go for her directly and ignore the spiders, or you can go around and take out all the spiders and then just wail on her. And I prefer to take out all the spiders first. You know, it's just less stressful to me when I'm trying to attack her and then they like 2-shot you. You know, the spiders are annoying. Plus, on your first playthrough, you probably don't know, but if you're hitting their heads, you do like 0 damage, and so you have to run around and hit their bodies. That doesn't take too long to figure out, but that can cause a couple of deaths if you're not careful. And so, I really recommend the summon for this fight. Damien is like the best summon in this game, maybe even like potentially in the whole series. You can summon him for another boss later on, which is which he is very helpful, but he helps draw aggro for the second and third phases, which is very helpful, because I think Rom isn't necessarily that much of a difficult fight, but she's a very frustrating fight. Because she doesn't fight you, and her fight is pretty long, which not only adds to the difficulty, but it's also very frustrating when you get her really low, and then you have to do all that again. It's very tedious. So he can draw aggro for you, and so yeah. The missiles she launches at you, they're not too hard to dodge. You literally just have to sprint one direction. But obviously, you have to manage your stamina so you can sprint or roll away in time. So, she's just a very good mid-game boss. She tests your skills enough. She tests your smarts a little bit as well. You can do whatever you want. There's a little bit of freedom for the player here. But I do think that she's not very easy, especially on her damage. You have to be very patient. Kind of like the living failures. You just have to be really patient. And I like to go around kill the spiders. You can just run at her if you really want to. But yeah, so I think her arena is also a very good arena. So good, in fact, that they copied it twice in Elden Ring, which I like that. Basically, I like to think that she's a less annoying version of Elden Beast. So yeah, that's Rom. Not too difficult. Basically, middle of the road. Everybody above this tier is going to be hard. Everyone below is going to be easy. But yeah, perfect mid-game boss, and not too difficult. Next up, we have the Shadows of Yharnam, who are a gank fight at the end of the Forbidden Woods area. One thing to mention right off the bat is, depending on your Covenant and quest line, you can actually have a good amount of summons for this fight. I think you can have like 2 or 3, which really help in a gank fight to take aggro off you. Although in this instance, he died really quickly because I think because I didn't help him. If you do take summons, make sure to help them out and trade aggro, not just have them get ganked and then you kill one guy, because you're probably not going to kill that guy fast enough. They're going to kill your summon faster. But the main thing that I think balances out this fight is the fact that they all three have different fighting techniques. So one guy has a katana and he is like a melee guy. There's one guy who has a candle, who is kind of like a mix between the two, who like spit fire at you, and he also has katana attacks, but he rarely does them. And then there's one guy who is a spellcaster who will just shoot fireballs at you. He's projectile only. So there are kind of two strategies you can take here. You can, bait parries on the katana guy, or you can just go and see if you can burst down the fireball guy first. He does have the least amount of health out of all of them, so he does go down the quickest if that is your strategy. I prefer the first strategy of just parrying that guy, because I think he's pretty easy to parry, as long as you're not using something like ridiculously slow, like, I don't know. Another thing that I think definitely increases the difficulty a bit is when they get to 30% health, they go into like their snake phase, and for the katana guys, they get like, their swords kind of get like this whip attack, which gives them like a really insane amount of range, and you can't really parry it, and it will definitely catch you if you're like trying to run away and heal and stuff like that. And so you definitely have to get more in the mix when they go into this phase. And also their signature move, the Moderus whistle, my opinion, that's probably the hardest move that they have, because what the guy will do is, when there's only one of them left, he will like do this move where he summons these like giant snakes out of the ground, and they'll come and attack you. And I think for me, it's really hard to dodge. It's really hard to outrange for how big the snakes are in this arena. So to me,
that definitely increases the difficulty. You know, I think I remember a few times on my first playthrough, I got the last guy really weak, and then he did that move, it just killed me. And, you know, that's frustrating, but it's not as frustrating as ROM, and I really don't think it's that difficult. I think you can kind of just tank it. Um, just make sure you have a lot of health. But especially if you leave the candle guy for last, you'll probably not do too bad when there's only one of them left. Especially since if it's the candle guy, I know it works in the candle guy. I haven't really seen it happen on the other ones, but if you just like attack once or twice, he'll automatically dodge. So you can basically get him in a loop where you break his AI and just keep whacking on him, and he keeps dodging, but he'll never attack you back. And it's pretty easy to do that. I did it on my first playthrough. I've watched someone else do it on their first playthrough as well, so I know it wasn't just me. I think, the last AI, I think, especially if it's the candle guy, because he's not made to be really in a one-on-one situation. And so, yeah. So the signature move can cause you trouble, but the last guy's AI will break, and they are balanced out by each other's abilities. And so I really, I think this is not too hard of a gang fight, especially for being a gang fight. It's not that bad. Next up on the list, we have an absolute hood classic of a boss. It's the Bloodstarved Beast. Another early game skill check. The boss of Old Yarnum, only the third area in the game. And so I think that the Bloodstarved Beast attacks themselves are actually pretty well telegraphed and don't do like a ridiculous amount of damage. So I think that, basically, like, if this boss did not have its poison damage, it would not be as high. But man, that poison damage is what puts it all the way up here, because not only does it, do a good amount of damage to you and fills up really quickly, in the third phase, just standing near it poisons you, not even getting hit. But it also adds like a whole nother level of stress to the fight, because you're basically, either if you run out of antidotes, you're on a time limit, and you gotta waste blood vials, and you gotta find time to heal when you wouldn't have. Especially in the early game, that makes a big difference. Um, so yeah, I think without its poison damage, the Bloodstar Beast would probably be a whole letter grade down. But because of the stress and, the damage that adds to the fight, I think that it comes all the way up to C. And a small little thing that I think is pretty cool is that the armor you get from Odiarnum, the Charred Hunter set, actually has the best poison resistance at this point in the game. So I think it's cool that the armor you get from the area is the most effective against the boss, but really this is the only boss that I can remember that, switching out the outfit is actually like important to help you in the fight. Most of the time, armor in this game doesn't really matter, but this is one of the few times where, if you're struggling on the boss, I recommend switching armor. But yeah, that's why the Bloodstar Beast ends up here at C tier. Next up, we have Amygdala, coming at the end of the Nightmare Frontier. And really, this boss is gonna vary widely. I think it really depends on what weapon you're using and, your playstyle. So, but mainly Amygdala, I think, obviously it's kind of like a gimmick boss where you just have to wait for it to do the attacks where its head is exposed or its arms. A strategy that I figured out, a while. Like, it took me a couple replays of the game, but actually going for its arms, because a lot of its attacks, it won't actually, actually have its head low enough for you to hit it on most weapons, but you can actually hit the arms a lot more reliably. But yeah, it just comes down to A, whether you figure that out, and B, how well you can execute that with your weapon and build. Um, but another thing is sometimes Amygdala's AI will just kind of be unfair. Like it'll just spam jump attacks or spam attacks where you can't punish it and stuff like that. And in its third phase, when it rips its arms off, sometimes it's hard to hit its arms and head in that phase because obviously those arms don't count as hitboxes anymore to deal damage. But overall, I think that this boss is not too hard. I think it's fairly good boss. I really like this boss, especially seeing like you can see them in the world and actually get to fight one. It's basically like the Nightmare Frontier saving grace. This is not ranked on enjoyment, but I will say the fact that I enjoy this boss definitely makes it easier to fight, and it's not too bad. It shouldn't take you too many tries to beat Amygdala. Okay, so coming up next, we have the one Reborn, and this boss is probably a lot higher than you would think. It's a lot higher than I expected it to be, because on paper, this boss is an absolute cakewalk. I mean, you put bolt paper, you have a sufficiently upgraded weapon, this thing goes down easy. But for some reason, I remember really struggling on this boss on my first playthrough, and not only that, but it can get me a few times on New Game Plus, and so I really couldn't understand. And I guess my best guess is that this boss kind of lulls you into a false sense of security. You think this thing is gonna get staggered so easily, I can just blitz through it, and then it doesn't, and then it just like one shots you. It's so weird. This boss, it's just like an anomaly. It's on some days it'll be the hardest thing ever, and on some days it'll be an absolute cakewalk. Um, but yeah, like I said, you upgrade your weapon enough, you put bow paper on it, you can stagger this thing with limb damage. It goes down. You just wail on it. You can get a lot of your health back through regaining as well. But you got to make sure you don't get hit by the AoEs, and you got to make sure you run away when it like pukes on the floor. This fight is gross. But anyways, a lot higher than expected, but even then, it's still a pretty easy fight. Alright, here is where things really start to heat up. Coming up next, we have what I consider to be the true final boss of the game. It's Gehrman, the first hunter, and what a fight this is. I really think that this fight is like the perfect difficulty for a final boss because he's not too hard, but he's not really a piece of cake either. He is very fast, so if you're going for parries, you have to shoot instantly, you have to dodge instantly. But in his first and second phases, he can be staggered, so that helps you out. Basically, he's just like all the other hunter fights in the game, except he does have a few tricks up his sleeve. For one, he is ridiculously fast. I mean, he dodges around, his attack speed, everything. He's fast. Um, Second of all, he has his third phase where he can't be staggered at all, and he gets that wind move, which, man, that wind move is ridiculously hard. I still don't have like a concrete way to dodge it. It does a lot of damage too. So yeah, that does a lot of damage. I feel like he's a very resource heavy boss. Like he's gonna take up a lot of blood vials and bullets off of you, but if you play your cards right, you should be able to beat him. He is a real skill test of skill. But he's not too difficult. I really like him. He's very fast. His arena is awesome, but I'd be lying if I said I was really out here, having a tough time on Gehrman. Um, he's not that bad. He does have that one. pistol. Like, it's not even a pistol. It's a gun that he uses on his back. If he shoots you with it, you automatically get like staggered into like a parryable state. But like he's never close enough to actually hit the visceral on you. So it's kind of like a wasted mechanic. I feel like could have made it a lot difficult if he would actually hit that visceral. But like he hits it like 1 out of like 10 times. So yeah, um, if you can beat the hunter fights, you can beat Gehrman. Um, Having a quick weapon really helps, but I don't think it's necessary for this fight. I think if you have a big weapon that'll stagger him, it'll work just as well as a quick weapon. And obviously, knowing how to parry will help you immensely. But yeah, just like other fights, I think he's about mid tier. Um, but yeah, really cool final boss. Alright, next up we have the waifu and disciple of Gehrman himself. And man, I am probably going to get some flack for this one. Being a DLC boss, Lady Maria, it comes with the expectation that she would be a certain level of difficulty. And really, I think it depends on your playstyle. If me, I embrace Bloodborne's fast pace and aggressiveness, and so I like to get up in her face, hit the parries, stagger her. I like using quick weapons. I like running her Rikuyo against her. Having her build. I love her build in the game. Um, so yeah, really, I am the ultimate counter to Lady Maria. I like to get up in her face. I like to parry. I like to dodge behind her. But obviously, a player who's more timid, who likes to wait and just find the openings, dodge around, maybe use a shield. Even though in Bloodborne there are no shields, but there's still a passive playstyle in Bloodborne. But for me, I feel like her fight is very similar to Gehrman himself, which I think is awesome. I think that's a great detail that FromSoft did. I think they did it intentionally too. Um, but yeah, I think you can just beat on her and, and parry her and just dodge left. And, I don't think she's too difficult. I think she is an epic fight. I think the quality of this fight is insane, but the difficulty. Although I will say, on one particular New Game Plus run, she did give me a good bit of trouble because I was on like an arcane build. So I will give her that. It could depend on your build, but honestly, I think if you are an aggressive player, if you can do the other hunter fights, she's no different. If you can parry, she's no different. I don't think she's that much special, and I don't think like the fire in her third phase is all too meaningful. So that's why Lady Maria finds herself this low, although I still love her fight. Coming up next is Vicar Amelia, and we're finally moving up in tier. And Vicar Amelia, I think, is not really a boss that everyone sleeps on, but I think is definitely a boss whose difficulty is understated. First of all, it is very easy to come into this under level. To put it in perspective, you can come fight Vicar Amelia without doing Old Yarnum and without killing the Bloodstarved Beast. Which is crazy to think there's probably some poor soul who ran into this with like a +2 Hunter's Axe. Um, so yeah, although it's not really fair to judge her based on that, I'm just saying that is a possibility. I remember having a good deal of trouble on this boss on my first playthrough. This was the first boss that I used a summon for. Obviously, I've beat her many times without the summon since then. But on my first playthrough, I really needed it to take the heat off me. And the main reason I think that she's so difficult is one, if you're locked on, it's kind of hard to see, and it's kind of hard to target specific limbs. Obviously, you can unlock, but, that's kind of a bit obtuse, and, A lot of times in these games, the default is to lock on, and then if things don't go well, you unlock. But it's not bad enough to where you want to unlock, but it's also not good because you still can't focus those limbs. Also, a lot of her like scraping attacks are really unclear on when they're actually going to hit you. You know, a lot of times you'll just dodge too early or too late because you can't tell exactly when it's going to hit you. She's got the bite attack, which comes out so ridiculously fast that you basically have to read it. You can't really react to that at all. Which, I mean, yeah, there's moves like that with a lot of bosses, but still. The fact that that comes out so fast and, you know, for just standing in front of her, kind of stupid. And, of course, she has the healing, which I don't think is too big a deal. Obviously, you get numbing mist, so you can, you know, negate that entirely. Um, but still, you know, getting her all the way down, and if you don't have numbing mist, or you don't know if you're on your first playthrough, watching her heal all the way back up, obviously, it's going to make the fight a lot tougher, make it go on longer, make you waste more blood vials. But ultimately, I think Vicar Amelia is still a manageable boss, but she's definitely harder than the ones that have come before her. Coming up next is Mechalash, Host of the Nightmare. Pretty late game boss. And man, we all know why he's this hard. He seems pretty easy. He's a gimmick boss. You just run up to him and whack him. Then you get to the second phase and he whips out a Call to Beyond and he one-shots you. And just for that alone, that's the only reason he's this high. And I think this is one of the few times where the frustration factor also comes into play, because this dude makes you so like irritated that you just get off your game. He gets in your head. And normally, you know, I just say, you know, whatever, you know, just be calmer, you know, or, you know, keep your composure. But this dude literally makes you like run around a whole maze every single time you die to him. And you get him down to like 10 health and he one-shots you. And it's just so annoying, especially on New Game Plus. It does a ridiculous amount of health, and the fight is kind of annoying. Although, you know, I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of a Michelangelo fan. I kind of like this fight, even though it's objectively kind of a bad fight. I think it's a cool idea. I like his personality. But God, you know, he literally will just one-shot you. It's the most annoying thing ever. That's why he's this high. Really, that's the only move he has, and it's probably one of the strongest ones in the whole game. But yeah, really, other than that, not much to it. Obviously, on your first playthrough, you're not gonna know where to chase him. But in my experience, once I figured out that he runs the opposite direction you come from, it's pretty easy to get him into the spot that I wanted. And yes, you can cheese him with poison knives. But yeah, honestly, I'm not taking that into account. Obviously, there are a lot of cheese strats in this game. You know, obviously Gascoigne would be ridiculously more easy if you could just make him jump out the arena. But, you know, not taking that into account, this dude is just, he's tough. He's annoying, and he takes longer than he should for what he is. But yeah, that's Michelangelo, Host of the Nightmare. Next up, and moving up in tier again, we have Ebrietas, Daughter of the Cosmos. She's kind of like a perfect storm of everything that makes a fight bullshit. First of all, the camera is awful. You cannot see what she's doing at all if you're locked on. Second of all, her animations for her attacks are like really unnatural. It's hard to tell what she's actually gonna do. Is this a sweep attack? Is it a poke? Is it a grab? You know, what type of attack is this? You know, when is it gonna hit me? I mean, yeah, she's an alien, but I think they could have done a better job in that aspect. You know, it doesn't excuse the fact that the animations are completely unnatural. Um, Another thing is the infamous charge attack. I swear, I just cannot dodge it. It hits me, it's like 90% of my health bar, and it just, I can't dodge it. I've tried like every method in the book. I still don't know how to charge it. At least there's a boss coming up later that has a charge attack, which at least I was able to figure out how to dodge that one. I have no idea how to dodge that one. And then there is her second phase where just standing next to her hurts you. Like, it's not even a poison or status effect. It literally just hurts you. And I didn't realize for a long time that the only way to counter that is to burst her down while she's going into that phase so that it doesn't last very long. Which is kind of ridiculous. Like, that is the only counter to it because any other time, you just can't do anything. So, yeah, I feel like this gameplay is not really gonna do justice how difficult this fight is for me because I took a summon, I just rode her ass. But really, this fight is kind of hard because, you know, it's just unnatural. It's weird, you know? It doesn't really follow a normal boss fight, what a normal Soulsborne boss fight looks like. And, of course, her damage is just ridiculous. I mean, yeah, you can have bolt paper, you can hit her head, but at the end of the day, she's gonna two-shot you. Alright, coming up next, we have the top three. And first up is Ludwig the Accursed and Holy Blade. Um, this fight is the first DLC fight, and on my first playthrough, gave me a good load of trouble. So much so, I think that before the DLC, obviously, I went in the Cum dungeon and I stocked up on blood vials, and I think this dude actually depleted my stock. I had like 200 in storage, and I actually like nearly ran out, or I did run out. I can't remember, but yeah, he was tough for me on the first playthrough. Um, Really, the reason why I think he's tough but really good and fair is because you have to actually learn his movements. In his first phase, he's like a beast, so he has a lot of quick and sporadic movements, and just basically just wildly swinging and clawing at you. But even though that's how it looks at first, there are actually a lot of like ways you can like use skill and like your own like tactical mind to your advantage. If you dodge in a specific way or at a specific time, you get these hits. If you're using this weapon, you get this bonus. And although that does exist for a lot of bosses in this game, I feel like Ludwig is kind of like the penultimate version of that. um but he has so many like just really deadly attacks that I'm not even gonna list them because basically every attack he does is ridiculously dangerous, especially in his first phase. Now, the only reason I think he's number 3 and not higher is because of his second phase. I think his difficulty drops off severely during his second phase. And I think it's mostly due to the fact that you can kind of like circle around him for free, and his attacks don't actually stun lock you. They look like they would, but a lot of times he'll hit you with one hit in his combo, and you can dodge the rest of them for free, which I think is a good decision, but it definitely makes it easier. He also has a lot of just really big windups, like not necessarily delayed attacks, but really big windups that give you a lot of opportunity to hit him. Um, I will say though, compared to a lot of other bosses, he's not very particularly weak to status effects here, because he's technically not considered a beast in his second phase. Um, so even if you have Serrated and Fire Paper, that second phase, you're not going to get those benefits anymore, which I think is pretty interesting, and I think it's pretty cool for his character. Um, but yeah, that's really the reason here. I think his first phase is like one of the highest skill required things ever, because obviously if you're good at Bloodborne, it's not going to be too bad, but really, like, you have to study his movements. But his second phase, I think the fact that he's just really easy to dodge around. He does a lot of AoEs, not too bad, and projectiles. Also, there are a lot of like scripted, like I want to say scripted visceral attacks in his fight, which do make it a bit easier. But ultimately, Ludwig requires a lot of skill, and he's one of my favorite bosses for that reason. All right, we are into the top two, and I really believe that these two are a cut above the rest in terms of difficulty. And we have the Orphan of Kos, which is probably a shock to many of you. The popular opinion is definitely that this guy is the hardest. Um, but as you can see, I've got him at number two, and my main reason for that is his first phase. Now, I'm not gonna deny this fight is ridiculously tough. He requires an insane level of skill and precision that really no other Souls game up to this point had asked for. And even then, it took till Elden Ring to get somebody who's really as hard as this guy. Even I think, well, obviously we can say Ishin, but that's Sekiro, and I personally don't think Sekiro counts as a Souls game, but a lot of people do. So yeah, Ishin would be this hard. But even bosses like Gale and Midir, I don't think are nearly as hard. But why is he so hard? One, his damage, pretty crazy. Two, he is insanely aggressive, especially in his second phase. His second phase is really what makes this fight so tough. Like, I feel like the reason he's number two is because his first phase is easy by comparison. His first phase still is not that easy. He has a lot of moves that can get you off of him. Like, if you get too aggressive, he'll just smack you in the face, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you have to respect him. And yes, you can go for parries, but you have to learn the moves exactly. You have to learn which moves you can parry, which ones you can't. Really have to get into his rhythm. You have to learn his rhythm. And, you know, obviously I love that from a boss. This boss is very tense and really stressful. I swear, like, FromSoft were really trying to give their players heart attacks when they made this boss. His second phase, like I've been saying, it's ridiculously tough. There are less attacks that you can parry. You can stagger him less often. He has the lightning attack, which, yeah, if you're not close to Orphan herself, to Kos herself, I mean, you can like sprint and find the opening in the lightning, but it's ridiculously tough to iframe through. Yeah, and then he has like the thing where he throws the shit at you. I don't even know what to call it, but it creates like this big line explosion. It's pretty tough to dodge. Not to mention the camera, like when he's all jumping around and stuff, it's kind of hard to follow. So, very stressful fight. He does a lot of damage, like I've been saying. Requires a lot of skill. You have to really stay on your game the entire fight. Like, this man does not let up for any moment. Maybe like you can say like his transitioning phase from 1 to 2, but still, like, you really gotta be on your game the entire fight. But I really think it's worth it. But to me, he is not the hardest, because I think once you learn him and you have him down and it's just a matter of execution, he doesn't really have anything that feels like he can like cheap shot you, you know? Really the lightning move is the only one that I feel that way about. I can't remember any other moves where, you know, I felt like it was kind of cheap. It's hard, definitely. The damage, it's very unforgiving. The damage and the windows to dodge and parry, very hard, but I still don't think that it's the hardest in the game. So, let's go find out what the hardest in the game actually is. finally, we have the hardest boss in the game, and it's a Cleric Beast reskin. Yes, I think Lawrence, the first Vicar, is the hardest boss in the game, and it comes down to a few simple reasons. His damage is ridiculous, and like really ridiculous. It means you have to play this fight basically perfectly. Now, even though it is Cleric Beast again, it's still ridiculous, you know? Especially since how much health he has, dude. This fight literally lasts like a whole 5 minutes. It's ridiculous. And I think any boss that has that much health, the difficulty will automatically go up. But especially pair that with his damage, which on New Game Plus is ridiculous. It basically means having to play that perfect for that long is really tough, and I really struggle with these type of endurance fights in these games, and so that alone probably would make him the hardest. But not only that, but his hitboxes, them adding the fire hitbox really makes him a whole lot tougher. Because not only now will you get hit by the attack, you get hit by the fire as well, or you'll dodge the attack and still get hit by the fire. And that's just kind of ridiculous. Not only that, but they took away some of like the key things that make Cleric Beast a good first boss that made him easier. You can't set him on fire. He's not weak to fire damage because obviously he's already on fire. Um, I think he's weak to serration, but when he's got so much health, what does it matter? You can't get really any visceral attacks on him. I think, I don't know. I've heard that the 2-shot to the head trick works, but I've tried it many times and I've never gotten it to work. Maybe my gun wasn't strong enough, maybe because I'm on New Game Plus. It just never worked for me. A lot of times, he is just so big for the room that you fight him in. It's the Vicar Amelia problem all over again. He's so big that it's like it's hard to dodge. You know, when he's and the camera. Sometimes he'll like just walk into a corner and you can't see and you can't dodge. And then his second phase, I think his second phase is a bit easier once you know what to do, but even then, his damage is still crazy. He will still one-shot you in his second phase if you're not careful and you don't play perfect. And it's just ridiculous, you know? I think for how long, he's just the really, like, endurance fight, you know? That's what makes him the most difficult, is not just having to play perfect, but having to play perfect for so long because you're doing toothpick damage to him with a plus 10 weapon on New Game Plus. It's just crazy. That's why I think he's harder than Orphan. Because Orphan, you have to play perfect, but that fight's not going to last that long if you do play perfect. But with him, you can play perfect. The fight is still going to take 5 minutes. And having to play that good for that long really just, you know, it takes so much focus. And, you know, this is also another one of those bosses where the frustration factor comes into play. Like Mikolash, like he just makes you so mad that you went all that time and you still failed, and it's just so annoying, you know? I think he just has a lot of the aspects of all the other bosses just rolled up into one package, and those are the reasons why I think Lawrence is the hardest boss in the game. And so that concludes our list for all of the Bloodborne bosses ranked on difficulty. Um, if you think there's anything that I left out or I missed or that you disagree with, go ahead and leave that in the comments because I'm always interested to hear other people's experiences with these games. You know, that's the good thing about these games is everyone has a different experience. And also, let me know if you would like to see any more of these videos. Um, like maybe based on enjoyment or the same list for any of the other games, because I'm definitely open to doing them. I've played a bunch of them, so I might as well. But yeah, that concludes this video. I'd like to thank you for sticking along to the end. This is one of the longer videos on my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.